What's up everyone, it's Q from RetroQ Gaming, and we're going to look at multiple different things in this video. You're going to see them all playing in the background, but I'm not really going to address every single one of them. It's more so just to illustrate my point. But what I want to talk about in this video is lost licenses, games that are essentially lost in time almost, and what you could even call video game preservation. I am, of course, talking about arcade games. So, when you look back at the humble roots of the arcade as we know it now, you could go all the way back as far as the 60s or 70s. I personally was born in the 80s, so I'm going from then onwards. I'm going from my experience. And usually when you look around and look at the titles and the names and the dates and all, you'll see that a lot of this stuff generally pops up all the time. So over the course of the 80s and 90s, the absolute breadth and wealth of games we had to choose from when going to an arcade was absolutely phenomenal. Of course, there's games like Street Fighter, Street Fighter 2, things like that have absolutely been a phenomenon and created whatever they went on to create over the years. But there's also many games that are essentially, well, lost licenses and lost in time. Now, what do I mean by lost licenses? Well, a lot of these companies no longer retain the license to whatever specific IP they were using and whatever specific brand they were using, whatever it is. But let me give you a perfect example of that. As you're seeing right now, we have Aliens playing on the actual arcade game from 1990. Konami no longer holds the Aliens license, so they can't really do anything with this game. Because for the longest time, Fox actually held the license for Aliens. And of course, just recently, that was actually one of the properties that was sold to Disney. But the point I'm making is, even though this game came out in the arcades in 1990, here we are 28 years later, and this game has never received a home port in any way, shape or form. This is obviously excluding MAME and the emulators and stuff, but it's never officially received a proper release on anything, even PC, on Steam, or digital download on anything, or physical copies anywhere. Literally the only way you can play this game is by getting yourself an actual old school arcade JAMA cab and getting yourself an old Konami Aliens board, not to mention getting a working one, and the cost and the size and everything is fairly prohibitive, and it's not for everyone. Or of course you can MAME it. Something you're going to notice across many of the videos playing in the background of this one here is that a lot of these games are action games, and a lot of them are beat-em-up style games, similar to, say, Final Fight, Streets of Rage, whatever it is. Of course, there's more popular ones that, of course, did receive ports in some way, shape, or form. Of course, one of the more famous ones being the Turtles game. And even the Simpsons and X-Men games actually made a port, granted severely later, on stuff like Xbox 360 Arcade. But until then, all these games were basically lost. Now, I don't know about where you guys live and how everything is there, but here in Ireland at the moment, as well as from what I hear in other countries and people that I know, but feel free to actually let me know the situation in the comment section below as well. But here, arcades are basically dead. In America, from what I understand, there's very few actual arcades anymore. Just like they have them here, nowadays an arcade is somewhere that's literally just video slots, video poker, whatever it is. Long gone are the days you can walk into an arcade and see dozens, if not hundreds, of cabinets all playing different games. Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Killer Instinct, Samurai Showdown, Metal Slug, Sly Spy, Aliens, Turtles. The list goes on. So gone are those days where everyone was huddled around cabinets playing with each other. You had 2 people playing on the same cab, 3 people, 4 people. There were even certain cabinets out there, looking at you, X-Men, that had a double wide 2-screen arcade cabinet with 6 players on it. Imagine that. Imagine a 6-player arcade game in a beat-em-up style back in the day. Everyone huddled around, popping in your coins as you go. Nothing beats it, man. It's crazy. And it's such a shame that we've moved on from all of that. So we've spoke about the lost licenses and the lost IPs and how companies can no longer essentially do anything with them. Or at least specifically, those companies can't do anything with them. I'll get to what that is now in a minute. But at the same time, it's very strange that some of these games obviously couldn't receive a proper console port back then. Because let's face it, even at the time, an arcade machine in, say, 1990, and a game that came out in an arcade in 1990, was far more powerful than anything like a Super Nintendo or anything like that. You really had to wait till something like the Sega Saturn or the Dreamcast to get proper arcade perfect ports. And with Sega being the way Sega was at the time, that was always kind of questionable. But a lot of these games have never actually had any proper sequel or proper license use, if you will. Okay, fair enough, Aliens did, because when you look at Aliens, it's a big franchise that actually kept going in other media over the years. We've had multiple films since then, granted pretty much all of them except one were shite. Let me clarify that, I mean all of them post Aliens arcade game, there we go. There was no way in hell I would ever call Alien or Aliens crap. Those films are amazing. But let's pull it back a little bit here and just look at the rest of them as a good example. Technically, yes, the Punisher did get a different game back on the 6th generation, but look at something like Captain Commando. Most people probably haven't even heard of Captain Commando, let alone play the amazing arcade game. And of course, that means nothing else has been done with it since. Now, not to mention that some of these could actually be ported over or released on whatever platform, because some of them are actually owned by whatever creators there were. Instead of, say, Konami having to go to a different company to use the Aliens license, Capcom actually own many of the licenses they've used for their actual arcade games. And they can do whatever they want with them, but they don't for some reason. And that's where the whole video game preservation thing comes into it. This is going to be a little bit of a touchy subject because depending on your stance on emulation, you may or may not have an issue with it here. But I'm looking at this side of it completely from the side of actually preserving video game history. Something that I've actually become more and more interested in over the last, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 months. So regardless of the whole emulation side of it, when you look at it, these games are technically now fully preserved in digital format on computers, on PCs, on the internet, on external hard drives, whatever it is. Instead of just potentially being locked in boards or whatever, because who knows if these companies even have the original ROM files anymore. They could, or maybe they couldn't. I mean, it's pretty much speculated that Nintendo don't even have the original Mario 1 NES code anymore. When you look at the whole thing with the Wii Shop version back on the Wii, they just pulled a random ROM from the internet, put it on there, because maybe they don't actually have it anymore. So from a preservation side of it, this is actually a great deal. That people have been able to construct these systems to connect up to computers and actually dump the ROMs onto computers to preserve them for technically forever. Now that's where the whole emulation side of it comes in, but again, that's a very touchy subject, especially when it comes to arcade stuff. Because after all, how do you pirate something that you can't properly buy anyway? But I don't really want to open that can of worms in this video, so we'll leave that for a different video at some point. Now, earlier on in the video, I mentioned that for the most part, a lot of these games and a lot of these companies can't be reused because of whatever reasons, be it licensing issues or maybe they just don't want to port them over, whatever it is. Something that's become increasingly popular over the last couple of years and we've seen more and more and more of, when you look at companies like Digital Eclipse, Backbone Entertainment, Hamster and Flying Tiger Productions, these are all companies that are actually porting over lost, or we won't even call them lost, calling them lost is almost unfair. But these are companies that are dedicated to porting over old games, not just old arcade games, but just old retro games onto modern platforms. There was multiple different versions of Street Fighter, and even stuff like Streets of Rage ported onto the Xbox 360. With stuff like PC, Nintendo Switch, PS4, and Xbox One, you've got companies like Hamster bringing over a bunch of previously arcade-only games and Neo Geo games onto these modern platforms. And just recently, Flying Tiger has actually announced that they're going to be bringing a lot of Data East arcade games to consoles and PC, which is all fantastic. There's many games out there that have been on arcades that some have not got a port to any home platform, and of course some have. So this might actually be the first proper time that any of these games make it outside the arcade. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, a lot of these games are beast, and it's such a shame that there's very few specialist places now that deal in arcades. And that's where you guys come in. I want to know in the comments section below, what fond memories do you have of arcade games? Be it in the arcades themselves, some story where maybe you got a high score or whatever it is, or you and a bunch of friends spent hours and hours and hours on a single game, just finished it all the way through. It doesn't matter if it's a side-scrolling game, a beat-em-up like we have here, if it's a single-player game, or if it's something like a light gun game or whatever it is. Any beast arcade story you've ever had, leave in the comments section below, as well as your favorite arcade games, even if they did get a port or even if they didn't get a port. I know we're going to have a lot of people putting in stuff like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and The Simpsons and whatnot, but it doesn't matter how many times those appear in the comments section below. I want to see every single one of them. I want to know just how many people love those and enjoy those as much as I did. So let me know all that good stuff in the comments section below. Hit the appropriate button if you liked or disliked the video. Feel free to hit the subscribe button, and I will see you in the rest of the videos in my channel.